Hi, I'm Christine Tulley, President and Executive Writing Coach at Defend and Publish, and welcome to episode 83, our very first interview with Barbara Sarnecka, who's the author of the Writing Workshop published in 2019. The interviews are going to be a part of our podcast series. We haven't done these before, so it's very exciting for me. I've always wanted to do them. And my new goal as our podcast moves forward into the next year is to try to do an interview once every 4 to 6 weeks with someone that has developed a tool, made a resource, made a book, something that would be useful for us for our writing productivity tips we share every week. So we're going to go ahead and do an interview with Barbara, and our episodes still will remain in that short format that you're used to. So we'll kind of do a speed run through the writing workshop and find out why it's so great. So let me start by asking Barbara to introduce herself.
I'm Barbara Sarnecka. I'm a professor of cognitive sciences at the University of California, Irvine, and I'm also the Associate Dean for Graduate Studies and Research in Social Sciences at UC Irvine.
Fantastic. So the first question I wanted to ask was one about who might use this book. And I'm asking because I came across the writing workshop when I was looking for a read for the summer. I'm always looking for books on academic writing and productivity. I referenced this. I called you a nerdy beach read in one of my podcast episodes because I knew that this was going to be a book I would read over the summer. And why I'm fascinated by this book, and I'd like you to tell our listeners a little bit about it, would be that I think the book probably has multiple uses. So how do you think various audiences, such as graduate students or early career faculty, potentially faculty developers, how might they use your book?
Well, this book is based on a writing workshop that I taught for PhD students for about 10 years in cognitive sciences. We also had a lot of philosophy, education, other social sciences students in there. And after, over time, students would stay in the workshop for years, and then they would graduate and they would go off to postdocs or faculty positions, and they would say, I'm going to run a workshop here too. And so it was kind of a way to put materials together for folks who wanted to replicate the writing workshop we were doing at UC Irvine, the one I was teaching. It was sort of like, here are 10 chapters about kind of everything you might want to know about how to run your own writing workshop, and really inspired by my students who were in the writing workshop, loved it, found it really helpful, and then started writing workshops themselves for their peers. So when they were postdocs or when they were junior faculty, or just because they wanted more time in the writing workshop than they were spending with me, they would start like satellite writing workshops on the side.
I see. That's great. You're spreading a movement.
Yeah. And so it was really developed with PhD students in mind. A lot of postdocs I know seem to really like it and find it useful. If anything, I think maybe the postdocs even find it more useful because they've clearly got so much writing to do. They generally have data collected, they have analyses done, and they just have to really focus on writing. Also, postdocs often don't have a lot of structure. You're not taking classes and you don't have so many meetings and things. So it's like the day kind of stretches out in front of you and you're trying to be productive, but it's kind of daunting. And then a couple of groups of faculty at my university have asked me to lead writing workshops for the faculty as well. And in that case, there are parts of the book that are like how to organize a literature review and how to write a scientific article and how to write a grant proposal. The faculty don't need that so much. They know how to write those things. What they really benefit from, I think, is just creating a community, getting together for like co-working time, creating kind of trusted relationships where you can show people drafts of something you're working on and get feedback, just that kind of making writing social, making it collaborative. That's what I think all of us need. Even if we already know how to write while we're writing, it's really nice to not have to do it by yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. Yeah. So a second question I would have then would be, I'm thinking about our clients for Defend and Publish. And so for those of you that are listening to our podcast, many of you are already some of our clients, either attending some of our workshops, some of our free webinars. You might be coming to us for individual writing coaching. And I know over the years, we've really seen a lot of different needs from different communities. So for example, We have a lot of, say, graduate students who are stuck in the middle of writing a dissertation. They're just stalled out. They're having problems with their supervisor. They don't like their topic anymore. But we also see a fair bit from faculty who are just struggling. Either they're in the middle of a project they also don't like, or they're really floundering. They're early career faculty and they're not used to writing without the support of a community, a PhD supervisor, or something like that. So I know you've got a lot of resources in this book, so I'll mention some of my favorites if we have time at the end. Otherwise, I'll link to them in our show notes. But I thought maybe you could just tell us 3 resources in this book. If somebody was going to get this book, what would be 3 things that they could get out of it right away? Tools, information, anything.
I think the biggest thing is just the emphasis throughout the book on forming a writing group, how to form a group of find other people to write with and meet with them regularly, and like how often should you meet and what do you do in these meetings, and how exactly do you structure this time that you're supposed to be meeting with these other people, because it sounds simple, but it could be awkward if you haven't done it before and people feel kind of weird about it. So I would say combating isolation by creating some social accountability and some community around writing is the most important thing that people can do at all stages of career. In terms of nuts and bolts, day-by-day writing productivity, I think the most important thing people can do is learn to write little and often, practice writing little and often rather than in big long binges. So a lot of the misconceptions that hold people back from writing kind of start to dissolve when you force yourself to write for like 10 or 15 minutes at a time. So ideas like, I can't get anything useful done unless I have 2 hours free, or I can't write unless I feel inspired, or I can't write until I know what I'm going to say. All of those things are not true, but they are misconceptions that hold people back, make people feel like they can't write. And the way to get rid of them is to just turn on a timer, set a timer for 10 minutes and sit down and force yourself to write for 10 minutes, even if you're just free writing, even if you're just writing like, this is so stupid. I don't know why I listened to that damn podcast that told me to write for 10 minutes. What a waste of time this is. And then you look at the clock and it's like 8 minutes left. I'm never going to listen to that stupid podcast again. Like it doesn't matter. Whatever you're writing, it doesn't matter. Like just practicing getting words from your head onto a page is so useful. And if you can practice doing that in little short spaces of time, then you start to feel over time like, oh yeah, I have 15 minutes. I could actually do something.
I'm glad you brought that up, because you actually are reminding me to mention a workshop that we'll be running in October about, right now we're tentatively calling it small writing. That might not be the name that we keep it, but the idea is that during the day, academic schedules are now so fragmented that people might have a class and then and I've talked about this in many episodes in the podcast, but you might have class, then you might have this weird 20-minute chunk before you're supposed to be at a meeting. And then you've got this weird like 12 minutes somewhere else. And you've just got these little pockets all during the day that many people just use to go and open up their email, or possibly to like try to prep for another class. And there's just the cycle of email and prep that laces through all of those things. So, just trying to work in these small segments, the majority of us will have to.
Say, well, I don't have time. I just don't have time to write. But of course, you've spent like 6 hours doing email and teaching prep that day, but you just didn't ever write because you didn't feel like the stars were aligned. You didn't have an hour free and you didn't have your favorite coffee and you didn't feel quite ready and you weren't quite sure what you were going to write. And I think cultivating, we call it ninja writing in the workshop, I
saw that. Yeah.
You sneak it in, stealthy little writing in little chunks of time. That is such a useful practice, because when you start doing that, you realize like, oh, actually, what people will say if they're used to not writing for long periods of time and then writing in long binges is they'll say, well, I spend the first 45 minutes just remembering what I was talking about. And that's true if you haven't opened this document for 6 months. But if you open it every day, if you worked on it yesterday for 10 minutes and you open it today, it really doesn't take any time at all to remember what you were doing. You can work on one paragraph, you can work on one sentence. And if you can do that, then you always have time to write, because you have these little chunks of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well
Yeah.
said. I know one of our episodes a couple weeks ago talked about using Penzu. It's an online writing journal where you basically can just log in, and I advocated using something like that. It's free. It reminds you in your email every day to write, and you just basically can click on your link in your email, open it up, and just take a couple quick notes, like, what the heck am I doing today? So even if you're doing writing about your writing, as you were talking about, like journaling or whatever, that could be a good space for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I take a perverse pride in writing in weird places. Like, I'm in the airport at the gate and I'm writing, woo! Or like I'm, waiting for my coffee and I'm writing on my little notepad app on my phone because we got to get over the idea that like writing can't happen except in special places at special times when you're exactly ready. That's just anxiety talking.
It is, and I think you can replicate certain things. Like if you've got ways to click in, and I know I did a webinar, I think it was last year, something like that, where I compared 3 pictures of what my writing looked like in my office, what it looked like during the pandemic, and then one time what it looked like in a car dealership, and how basically all the elements were the same. So my laptop was still there, my coffee was still there. There were things that just look the same. And I think you're totally onto something where we just have to get over thinking like, oh, well, if I can't sit down in my special little corner, then shouldn't worry about that today. When it'll just never get done.
And the third strategy I think that's really important, besides building community and writing little and often, I think the third one is recognizing that the only thing you can control is how you spend your time. Because people spend inordinate amounts of energy worrying about stuff like, what are other people, is this grant going to be funded? Like, are other people going to like my work? Are the reviewers going to tear it up? Is my advisor going to say it's crap? Like, and that stuff, we can't do anything about that. Like you can't do anything about what other people say or what other people think or what happens to the writing after it leaves your desk. All you can do is decide how you're going to spend this hour, this week. And I think the more people focus on that, on how am I going to spend my time, what am I going to do, and try to kind of let go of the things, not that you don't care what somebody thinks, not that you don't care if the grant gets funded. Of course, we want the grant to be funded, but like, if I told you, I'm only going to consider myself a success this summer if it rains 7 days out of July, you'd be like, well, that's dumb. Like, why? Then you're just putting your happiness in the hands of fate because you have no control over whether it rains, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if I say I'm only a success if I get this grant and that paper gets accepted and my advisor says I'm the smartest student they've ever worked with, like, that's all just making you miserable, right? Because you can't do anything about that. So I'm a big proponent of like thinking about how to spend your time, planning your work, prioritizing, and doing it all in terms of stuff you can control, making plans around what you can control.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great advice.
And that's why we have a rejection collection, which you probably know about if you read the book. We have
I do.
in our writing books, we keep just like an Excel, like a Google Sheets spreadsheet online. And every time somebody in the writing group gets rejected from something, like submits a paper that gets rejected or applies for a job that they don't get or applies for a grant that they don't get, they add it to the rejection collection. And every time we get to 100 rejections, we have a party.
That's fantastic. Yes, and actually, I'll put a link in the notes to these templates and resources that go along with the book, because my next question, I'll talk about this a little bit more, but these templates and the rejection collection and those kinds of models are all freely available. So anyone can go look at these. They can look at how they work. They can look at samples. They can try them on their own. And like I said, I'll put a link to that in the show notes. But I thought you could say something about that, just in terms of publishing the book as open source, freely available, freely accessible. I'll pop it up on the screen so people can see what it looks like for YouTube viewers. But if you could say something about that, you did self-publishing and open source, maybe let us know about your choices there.
Yeah, I decided to self-publish because I wanted to be able to give the book away for free, and no publisher is going to go for that. So,
sadly, no.
I wanted to have like a print book that people could buy if they wanted a print copy, and of course it costs money to print a book, and so that's fine. The book is on Amazon if people want to buy it. It costs like $25, but if you can't afford that, oh, there you go. if you can't, $25 is not affordable for everybody. And especially if there are a lot of countries where if you're in developing economies, $25 is just a crazy amount of money. And, especially when folks are in grad school, early career, people often just don't have a lot of money. And so I wanted everybody to be able to download the full text of the book for free if they wanted it. There it is.
Yep, I just popped it on the screen. So audio listeners, you can check this out in the show notes. There'll be a link to it. But essentially, if you type in the writing workshop, you're able to get it pretty quickly. I found just doing a quick Google, and it goes to OSF Home. So I think it's open source something home.
Open Science Framework.
Open Science Framework. Thanks for correcting me. So yeah, so this would be a place where you can get it. And I know just from clicking it around myself, I was able to get the book, get the templates. I saw the rejection collection. You have a shared writing log in there, which is really great. I know I'm going to try that out this semester with a faculty group that I run, where everybody can note when they're writing, and there's ways to celebrate writing within that document.
Yeah, it's really fun. Another way to read the book that's fun is on Perusall. So that's also free. So there's a site called Perusall, Perusall. It's like Perusal, but with 2 L's at the end. .com, and that's a platform for social reading. So you can form book clubs, or you can use it in teaching. Your students can log on and read a thing together and like highlight passages from it and talk about them together. Like I could highlight a part and say, hey, this doesn't make any sense to me. And you could see, when you read it, you would see my comment and you could be like, oh, I think it means this. People can have conversations with each other about the text. So I really like Perusall, and the book is on there. It's in the Perusall catalog, and the price is $0. So it's free on Perusall.
I love it. That would be a way too to get participation from a group, because I know we talked at the beginning about it's difficult to get a writing group going and make sure everybody participates. And this would be one other layer to make sure people are reading, because there's that active and collaborative reading act happening at the same time.
Right. So you could put together a group and be like, hey, you guys, let's read this book together. It's on Perusall. It's free. It's free for everybody. There's no ads. It's a great platform. I actually really like the platform. I use it a lot in teaching, but you can do it as a book club too. You can have a class on there with a teacher who assigns things, or you can start a book club on there where everybody just joins it and reads a book together. So that's actually my favorite way to tell people about it, because it's social and collaborative.
And the very things you're advocating in the book itself. So that's great. So tell me a little bit about publishing something and being self-published, because we do get a number of students, faculty that ask about this, and especially as self-publication is really growing, people are just putting things out that they want. So how did you figure out how to do that?
Well, I mean, I have to warn you that if you're an academic, a self-published book is not going to count toward promotion and tenure. It's not a peer-reviewed scholarly publication. So I waited until I had tenure, and I didn't do this as a way of getting publications on my CV. I just did it because it was the book I wanted to write. And it was really fun. I had a great time. I read a lot of things about self-publishing. I decided to pay for the parts that I couldn't do or wasn't good at or didn't feel like doing. So I paid a really great developmental editor. Put a plug for him. His name is michael.dylan.rogers.
We'll link to him if you share contact information. Happy to help him out.
So he's an editor. He's actually a professor at another selective liberal arts college on the West Coast, but he has a PhD in, I think, history and philosophy or something. And he's a great editor. And I found him, and he edited the book for me, it's just really helpful to have somebody read the whole thing very attentively and talk about, how do you think it should be organized like this? Do you think this should go in that chapter? I think this should be shortened. Like, it's just really nice to have somebody paying that much attention to your work and giving you that much detailed feedback on it. So I loved that. I'm sure people are curious about money. I paid him $5,000 to do this book that was about 200 pages long. And then I also paid a book designer, Lindsey Cleworth. We can put her information also. Yeah. So I really wanted the book to look a certain way. Aesthetically, I wanted it to be like friendly and clean and like beautiful. I wanted it to be uncluttered and unintimidating and like, I don't know why. I just had feelings about how I wanted this book to be. And
it's beautiful. It's beautiful because I like books to look visually satisfying and not to make the writing process scary. This is just a person, people know this who have been listening to this podcast for a while, but they know we talk about academic writing in a very productive, happy, positive kind of a way, even if it's not happy or positive all the time. We talk about it in that kind of a way. So resources I look for specifically have that kind of message that, okay, maybe you can't do all of it. Maybe you can't even do 80% of it, but you could do this 20% in an amazing way. So I really like what it looks like. It just looks like a fun book to use.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I wanted to convey that sense of French friendliness and like warmth and comfort. Like, we have penguins all over it, and the penguin theme is because penguins, they live in the Antarctic, some of them, and it's freezing cold, and if they stood there alone they'd just freeze to death. But they huddle, they do this thing called social huddling. And they all stand in a group and they keep warm and they stay alive that way. And this is like the central metaphor for the writing workshop, is that you huddle like a penguin, huddle together with your other peers and keep each other warm. And so I really wanted it to be friendly and happy. And Lindsey did a lovely job. She designed the cover and she designed the interior of the book. And so then I paid a proofreader and I paid an indexer. And so it was a total of about $10,000 it cost to make the book. And one of the questions, I had some questions going in, like I thought, maybe the book will suck, like, I don't know.
It doesn't.
I made a book, like, I don't know. And then, and happily it won an award from the Society for the Improvement of Psychological Science. So then I was very happy. I was like, hey, it won an award, so it clearly doesn't suck. And I'm vindicated in not working with a publisher. And I also thought, well, is this a vanity publishing project? Like, maybe I will never make this money back. Maybe this will be just like an expensive vacation I took to the land of pretending I can write a book. But it paid for itself. So in the first year, it sold about $10,000 worth of copies, and then I broke even, right? So it actually didn't cost me money in the end. But I wasn't sure going in. I didn't know how many copies it would sell. I didn't know if it would be any good. But in the end, I don't regret anything. In the end, it was a lovely experience. I wrote the book I wanted to write. People seem to like it. I'm able to give it away for free to anybody who can't afford it. So I've been very happy.
Yeah, well, on that note, as we close out our discussion today, do you have a resource or a book you want to recommend that you like? I recommended yours to everybody. Okay. So why don't we do the chain of love, and you can recommend something else you think is really great for supporting academic writing.
I can recommend this podcast now to people. I guess my favorite resource would be the Explorations of Style blog by Rachel Cayley. So she's an academic writing consultant in Canada, I think, like Toronto or someplace. And she just has a ton of really great, super practical academic writing advice on her website. And I really have learned a lot. She's got the archive of all the old blog posts going back years and years. And I think she's great. So that's when I don't know what to do, I often just go on over to the Explorations of Style blog and check out what she's talking about.
That's a great name. We'll definitely stick that in our show notes, and we'll stick it out on Twitter too, so everybody can catch that in that way as well. All right, Barbara. Well, thank you so much for talking to us today about the writing workshop. I will put in, if you don't mind, I'll put in a link to a website or something so people can go and find you if they have any questions or want to talk more about the book. But thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Christine. Bye.
Happy writing, everybody.